This fly, the Katydid, the scarlet ibis, and the yellow Sally are, for all intents and purposes, identical. The only difference between this fly and the other two, other than overall coloration, is this fly technically is not supposed to have a tag, but I put one on anyway. And the reason I did is if you don't put a tag on these flies, you'll find that the floss tends to run off the back. There are ways of dealing with this without putting a tag on, but the simplest approach is just to put a tag on, and that's what I've done here. This hook is a Mustad 3399, a great hook for these wet flies, the old standards. This is the number 6. It's pretty big. It's easier to see for purposes of the video. Normally you would tie this anywhere from 6 to number 12, maybe even as small as a 14. I'm using Benecki 12-aught white thread for the underbody. And on this fly, I'm going to use Mylar tinsel. I don't think I've done that on any of my videos. I like to use metal, but Mylar is absolutely fine. If you tie in on the far side of the hook, as I do, which is a good way to do it, put the gold side against the hook shank. It's counterintuitive, but it will work. Once you start winding, the gold is then on the outside. So start with it on the inside, assuming you're tying in on the far side of the hook. It's 5 turns down, 5 turns back, and then back off on the thread so you don't get a lot of bulk at the rear. And tie it off underneath the hook. Stuff is a little springy. Here I'm flattening the thread, spinning the bobbin counterclockwise as if you're unscrewing a light bulb. And I'm going to take the thread all the way up to the front, and then off camera, I'm going to build a body using the thread that's, as you can see, it's a little bit more fat in the middle and tapered at the ends. And that's a traditional wet fly body. Now I'm tying in some duck quill slips. The near slip is from the right, and the far slip is from the left duck quill. Each of these slips is about 4 strands wide. I like to bind down the butts most of the way down the shank and then cut at an angle to give the body some bulk. And I cut it at an angle so that it'll taper off. But you can handle it any way you want. There are a lot of different ways to do this sort of thing. Take the thread back to the tail. And the idea is to get this tail as straight as you can, and that looks pretty good. Now tie the Mylar tinsel in on the far side of the hook. This will be our ribbing. Put the gold side towards the shank and just keep it in place with 1 turn. 1 turn of thread only. Now tie in again on the far side of the hook just 2 strands of Danville 4-strand floss. These 2 strands will make up our body that we wind forward. And they tie in just immediately in front of that of the ribbing material. Run to the front. Everything is bound down underneath the hook. I've smoothed things out a bit here by running the flattened thread back and forward. I did that off camera so you wouldn't be bored to tears. And now I'm going to wrap the floss, trying to keep the two strands very parallel to each other and very flat. And this is overlapping just slightly. It's not quite edge to edge, but almost. Notice I don't leave myself a lot of room up at the front here. And that's to promote a small head. Trap the floss a couple times and then trim it. This is a small agate stone that I'm using as a burnishing tool here. On a fly like this, honestly, this is unnecessary. You're going to have ribbing anyway. This doesn't prove much. If you want to do it, if your body came out maybe really lumpy or something, you could do it. But in the vast scheme of things, it doesn't matter. There's traditionally 5 turns of ribbing, but it doesn't have to be 5. It's not a rule. It's just kind of a custom. Sorry, my head gets in the way a little bit here. I'm still working on my setup, perfecting it, and apparently it's not perfect so far, but we'll get there. So these look fairly well spaced. They could have been a little closer together. One way of evening up the spaces as you wind is to try to keep the angle the same on all the wraps. Now I'm going to switch to black thread up here at the front. Another tradition, these flies typically, with a few exceptions, had black heads. As a matter of fact, I think many of them were probably just tied with black thread, period. The reason we started with white was the black can show through when the floss gets wet and can darken the look of the floss, which is, if that's what you want, then that's fine. But if you want it to be green, you need a light underbody. Tying in a hackle here. This is whiting American that I've dyed green. I'm very confident that's what this is. And it's really nice hackle. Whiting American hen is great stuff for this. But I also like Metz a lot. Metz hen. It's really good. And I typically buy my hackle white and dye it for a lot of these Bergman style flies. I was looking for my hackle pliers, couldn't find them. I was getting towards the end of my rope there, and I thought, I better clip on the hackle pliers. I typically don't like to wrap hackle with hackle pliers if I can help it, if I can do it by hand. But, when it gets kind of short, grab the hackle pliers. I just seem to have better success doing things with my fingers rather than trying to use tools. And I'll have an entire video or two with featuring tool diatribes. I'm vehemently opposed to most tools, but there are tools that I love, of course, as well. So those will be coming up here in the near future. I'm also going to do another one of this exact fly. I'm going to do the scarlet ibis, and I'll do it in hand with no vise as a means of proving how few tools you really do need. It'll probably be the next video I do after this one. It'll be kind of fun. Okay, I've got left and right duck quill slips here. They're about a gap width in width, and the right duck quill is forming the near wing, tying both wings on at the same time. A gap width in width sounds redundant, but it really isn't. Now, here's a way to get a small head. Right now, cut these butts, twist the thread up clockwise a lot to make it very strong, and then just start wrapping hard up towards the up towards the hackle, up the wing, and just bind this down hard while you're holding the wings in place with your left hand, and then do a whip finish and you're done. Cut the thread. This is fly tight tying cement that I've been using recently. It penetrates a little bit. It's not as good as the Griff's Thin that I used to use, but they don't make that anymore. So I'm using fly tight now to get some penetration. And then I'll do, once that dries, which takes about 5 minutes tops, I'll do some Sally Hansen's. And here's the finished fly. Take a look at the wing and the tail right here. That's what you're shooting for. Very happy with that. Other aspects of the fly, maybe not quite as happy. But anyway, every once in a while, you've got to find something good with a fly you've done. Have fun.